is a beautiful yet very warm day here in Arizona, and my video topic this week is the top 7 crimes that happened here in this state over the last 45 years that probably shook up my world the most, had the biggest impact on me, where it's like, what the heck, did that actually just happen here? And before I get started, if you've just landed on my channel, I would love it if you would subscribe to it, maybe hit the thumbs up if you like the video. I post here about topics relating to living in Arizona, specifically northern Arizona, but this week I'm talking about a topic that permeated the entire state. So I want to start by saying that we are relatively safe here in Arizona. The crime rate is not exceptionally high, but yet there always are things that happen, especially with all the people moving to the state. You're always going to find some lunatics or some robbers or somebody to come in and shake up your town, and these are the top 7 that have happened to me since we lived in the state of Arizona. So I'm going to begin by going back all the way to June 2nd, 1976. So in 1976 was the year of the bicentennial, and Arizonans are extremely patriotic, and they were even more so in 76 in the 70s, and we were preparing for the bicentennial celebration on July 4th for the entire year. I mean, we had our own special quarter, which I know doesn't sound like a big deal now, but back in the 70s there was only one quarter, so to have the bicentennial and prepare for this massive 200-year-old birthday of our country was a big deal. So we're in the month of June, right before 4th of July. It's hot, and we had a local reporter named Don Bowles. Now, Don Bowles was just a journalist for the Arizona Republic. Arizona Republic, not that big. I mean, the entire state only had 2.3 million people living here in the 70s and 76 when this happened. So Don Bowles is a local journalist for the Republic. He gets a tip from some thug named John Harvey Adamson about some crime story that he was about to break. Now, Bowles did a lot of stories on the mob, organized crime, possibly shady business people, so it's possible for him to be covering a story that they didn't want to get out, which is likely what happened. But that is what happened. He gets a tip from this John Harvey Adamson to meet him at the Hotel Clarendon in downtown. So he goes to the Clarendon, he parks, and he goes inside looking for John Anderson. While he's looking around, John Anderson plants the bomb underneath Bowles' car. Bowles waits for a while, but never hooks up with this John Adamson, so he thinks he's been stood up, and he goes back into the car, and he starts the car, where somebody else, third party, now detonates a bomb that explodes, rips up the driver's side seat, and poor Don Bowles is very mortally injured, but he was taken to the hospital and died 11 days later. So what was so weird about this crime? So 76, I'm about 12 years old. We had not left New York that long ago. My mother grew up in a neighborhood that she used to describe as being protected by the mafia, whatever that means. So I would have expected this type of thing to happen where my mother grew up, but really here in Arizona it was just very weird. Poor Don Bowles. He eventually, this Adamson guy, John Harvey Adamson, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder because he was the bomb plant, and he was convicted in 1977, served 20 years in jail, but he died in prison in 2002, or at least he died in 2002. I'm not sure if he was still in prison. So there was another guy that was convicted, Max Dunlap. He is the one that ordered the hit. He was convicted in 1993, and he died in 2009 in prison. So Don Bowles, again, early on in my childhood, I remember that clearly, and it still rocks my world today that this happened in the state of Arizona back when there were so few people here. So I'm going to take you now to number 2, which occurred on June 29th, 1978. Bob Crane, you all remember Bob Crane, charismatic, funny guy who starred in the TV show Hogan's Heroes. Hogan's Heroes was a big show back then. Now, I don't know if everybody remembers, but in the 70s, most homes only had one TV in the home, right? So I didn't watch war movies. I didn't like them at all, but my brother watched all of them. So always had Hogan's Heroes on. I did think Bob Crane was cute. but I often would watch it just because it was on in the house with my brother watching it. So I was very familiar with Bob Crane, and I was shocked to believe that he had an apartment in Scottsdale. And apparently he had been doing dinner theater in Scottsdale at the time of his death. So what happened with Bob Crane is on June 29th, 1978, they found him in his apartment, bludgeoned to death. I believe it was with the camera tripod, and he also had a ligature around his neck. Now, this story went, or this case actually is technically unsolved, but we're pretty sure we know what happened. Back in 78, there was no DNA. Scottsdale police, they were in their infancy. They had no idea how to secure a crime scene. So it went unsolved. We have one suspect named John Carpenter. So apparently Bob Crane, they called him a sex addict and a porn addict. Well, you know, today every actor in Hollywood could be that, and it wouldn't surprise you, but back then it was like, ooh. And John Carpenter had sold Bob Crane some video equipment, and Bob Crane would tape some of the sexual escapades with women he had picked up. And this John Carpenter guy kind of liked hanging out with Bob Crane because he would get Bob Crane's spillover of women. So at some point, Bob Crane's like, you know, I don't really like this Carpenter guy. I want to get rid of him. And he was going to give him the slip. So I heard that a day or two before his death, he had actually told Carpenter, you know, I don't want to be friends with you anymore. It's just too much. We're not friends. But the day before Crane's death, I believe he was seen out with John Carpenter. So who knows what happened, but the very next day they find Bob Crane dead, and John Carpenter had returned his rental car to the rental car company. I think it was Hertz. And I did see in crime shows later on pictures of when they went and retrieved the rental car, they took pictures and there was brain matter on the inside of that car. It was just awful. Now, if this happened today, they would immediately DNA test the brain matter, and they would have found blood and all that, and they would have been able to convict this Carpenter guy. But in 78, no DNA. They did try to retest the DNA in the 90s when they started to figure out how to do it, but the sample had been so degraded that they were unable to come up with the result. Anyhow, John Carpenter was acquitted. I believe it was 98-ish? No. That's when he died. John Carpenter died in 98. He was acquitted sometime in 94 because they never really had enough evidence. But we're pretty sure that John Carpenter was the killer of Bob Crane. Of course, it'll be interesting tonight on my favorite show on television. There's a show on Reels called Autopsy with this hottie pathologist, Dr. Michael Hunter, and he's actually doing a special on Bob Crane's murder tonight. So in about 4 hours, I'll be able to watch that. But that was my take on it. I'm sure it was this Carpenter guy. I'm sure if it happened today, it would have been solved. But here's something very sad about this case, and I see this all the time, is Bob Crane was in the middle of a divorce from his second wife at the time of his death. And because of that, because he was technically married to that woman, she got his entire estate, including royalties from Hogan's Heroes and that kind of stuff. And supposedly his kids, his biological kids, got nothing, and still today they don't get any royalties from their father's estate. Now, of course, I'm not a journalist. I didn't go verify these facts, calling people up to see if it was true, but I did hear that, and if that's the case, that is very sad. Very sad to hear that. The whole thing is sad, but you know, how could you do that to your former husband's kid? Just cut them out of the estate when you know that's what Bob Crane would have wanted. He would have wanted his children to have the estate. So he was 49 at his time of death. Again, huge story here in Arizona because Bob Crane was so famous, and it happened right here in Scottsdale. So number 3 on my list, many of you may not have heard of this guy, but his name is Danny Ray Horning, and really he was just a 2-bit thug here in the state of Arizona. He had been released early from prison as a parolee in June of 1990, had continued to stir up some mischief, but in 1991, in March of 91, he was arrested for robbing a bank in Winslow, and while he was under arrest, he had leaked out that he had killed some drug dealer in California. So now he is sent back to jail, and he is a convicted bank robber and murderer in Florence Prison, which is the big prison here in Arizona. And in May of 1992, he puts on a lab coat and pretends to be the staff at the prison and walks out of jail and escapes. So this was actually the biggest manhunt in Arizona history, because he spent 2 solid months on the run, mostly in northern Arizona. He's being spotted in places. He's breaking into cabins and eating their food and writing notes that said, "Thank you for feeding me," and then going on these rants. He was spotted in the Grand Canyon. Actually, at the Grand Canyon, he hijacked several people. He had been threatening to kill hostages, but he did carjack a couple, 2 or 3 people near the Grand Canyon. And this one couple, he took them out in the woods. They're thinking he's going to shoot them in the head, but instead he handcuffed them to a tree and let them live. Thank goodness for that. Anyhow, I'm sure they had the hell scared out of him. He was sighted at Mormon Lake, and so the reason I put this so high on my lake is in 1992 was the year that I was preparing to quit my full-time job, move up to my family's cabin in Mormon Lake, and get my master's, my MBA from Northern Arizona University. So Danny Ray Horning is on the run as I'm getting all my ducks in a row so I can move up to Mormon Lake. So he is on the run, spotted where I'm gonna live. Now, one of the days that he was on the run, the news was driving through Mormon Lake, and they saw my father. My father was at our company cabin, and they go running out with microphones and cameras. "What do you think of Danny Ray Horning?" And my father turns to him and says, "Nothing, I'm not telling you anything. I don't talk to the press," and he sent them away. So I think that's kind of funny. What's more surprising is he didn't tell him, "Well, if he shows up here, I'm just going to kill him," because that's like something my father would say. And he didn't. He just didn't talk to him. So anyhow, they're on this manhunt. Now, after 4th of July weekend, at some point, they found him drinking out of a hose at a cabin between Flagstaff and Sedona. A big manhunt chase scene happened, and they did eventually pick up Danny Ray Horning, put him back in jail. But that was the nightmarish 2 months in 1992 that we had the biggest manhunt of the state, right as I'm ready to move and go to NAU. And thankfully they comprehended him, and he is back in jail where he belongs. So I'm going to number 4 on my list. Now, number 4 is actually the most hideous crime that has ever occurred in the state. Heinous, hideous. It was the Buddhist Temple Massacre. Now, this occurred on August 10th, 1991, and there was a temple called Wat Prom Konaram. And I'm sorry if I said that wrong. That was in the Waddell, which is on the far west side of Phoenix. So there were 9 Buddhist monks. Actually, there were 6 monks, a monk in training, a nun, and an altar boy. 6 of them at this Buddhist temple. These 2 guys, which were 16 and 17 years old, decided they were going to rob the temple and leave no witnesses. Now, first I'm thinking, why would you expect there to be anything valuable in a Buddhist temple? And second of all, there's nothing that is going to send you straight to hell any faster than executing a group of monks, no less, Buddhist monks. So 9 of them were found in the temple. They were actually all in the circle, kind of with their heads together. Some of them were holding hands. These 2 guys went and just shot every one of the 9 human beings in the head and let them die. And I have seen the crime scene photos. I suggest you do not look at them, because some of them are holding hands, right before they're killed. And it was just a gruesome and horrible scene. So after the crime, there were people being arrested. We had false confessions, weird old stuff happening, but eventually we did find the perpetrators. There was a guy named Jonathan Duty, who was only 17 years old, and his accomplice Alessandro Garcia, who was 16 years old. So apparently this guy Duty was the mastermind of the whole thing, and this Alessandra just went along and helped him. But it doesn't matter. Brutal, disgusting murderers who, oh my God, I still can't get over that they could do this. Duty got 9 life terms and 33 years to be served, not at the same time, back to back. And Alessandro Garcia also was sentenced for a very long time. They will likely spend the rest of their life in jail. But still, horrible, heinous crime that to this day, when I think about it, it makes my blood boil is just so awful. So now we're going to move to 2008, June. Again, you notice a common theme. Heinous crimes, if they're going to happen, often occur in the month of June. So anyhow, this is the Jodi Arias case, and I'm sure many of you around the country, this was televised every night during the trial. So apparently Jodi Arias, she's a beautiful young lady, and she becomes obsessed with a former boyfriend named Travis Alexander. Now, in everybody's life, men string along women, women string along men. Yeah, it sucks, but you know, you find out, you call the guy the bastard, you talk to your girlfriends on the phone for an hour, cry and eat a gallon of ice cream, and then you move on. That's what normal people do, but not this Jodi Arias chick who was obsessed with Travis Alexander. Travis Alexander's friends said, you know, this girl's got a screw loose, you want to distance yourself from her. There were many warning flags. So on the night of June 9th, 2008, she drives from her home in California and shows up at Travis Alexander's home in Mesa. Now, I don't know what happened there, if he let her in, if he was expecting her. Somehow she ends up in the house and they're having some kind of a sexual escapade. And when they're done, Travis Alexander takes a shower and this psycho woman comes with her camera and a handgun. And I'm going to show you this picture here, which is thought to be the last picture of him alive. She snaps a picture of him right before she shoots him in the head and stabs him 27 times, and his body slumps, dead body, to the bottom of the shower, and she's taking pictures still. Weird. I mean, crazy. Anyhow, the police do eventually catch up with her. She eventually is convicted of, I think it's first-degree murder, and she's spending her life in jail. Now, another thing that's weird about this one is that now that she's in jail, she is flirting with the prison guards, she's making art and selling it online, she's talking about having fajitas in jail. It's crazy, psycho woman. Definitely has a screw loose, and poor Travis Alexander, very nice looking, supposed to be very well-mannered, kind young man, dead, and his family devastated. So that was number 5. Jodi Arias, psycho crazy woman, hunts down and kills her poor unsuspecting former boyfriend. Now number 6 is by far the most craziest person on the list, Jared Loughner. So now Jared Loughner, this is January 8th, 2011. Now this is Elvis's birthday. Not expecting this to happen. So Jared Loughner is eventually diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenia, but he obviously has a lot of mental illnesses going on. He rants on social media about injustices of the world, and he's psycho. So he lives in Tucson. Representative Gabrielle Giffords at one point had gone to his high school or some event where he asked her a question that said, if words could not be understood, what does government mean? Like, what the hell is that question? Anyhow, whatever she answered, he didn't like it, so he's got his chip on his shoulder for Gabrielle Giffords now for the rest of his life. So Gabrielle Giffords, on the day of January 8th, 2011, is holding a little meet and greet with her constituents in a Safeway parking lot in Tucson. Jared Loughner shows up, totally psychoed out, just starts shooting people, randomly shooting people. He actually hits Gabrielle Giffords in the head. Now, on the news here in Arizona, the first story was that Gabrielle Giffords is dead, has been executed. But then when the news came out, they did get her to the hospital. They were able to save her life miraculously, but she has had neurological damage and can't perform as a congresswoman anymore, and that's super sad. Her husband, Mark Kelly, is now senator here in Arizona, but she was the intended target and she survived, but 6 other people were killed and 13 people injured seriously. And amongst the dead is a 9-year-old cute as a button little girl who was born on September 11th, 2002. So it's a beautiful young little girl who is the same age as my daughter. That's why this one struck me. I would look at the little girl's picture and she looks the same age as, and she's dead. Plus there was a judge and a couple, 6 people dead. from this crazy, crazy guy. So he is in prison, he's ranting, he's actually medically incompetent to stand trial, which, you know, you believe in this guy, he is, because he's crazy. So they're stuffing pharmaceuticals down his throat for about 3 months to get him to the point where he can appear before a judge. He does plead guilty. He pleads guilty to first-degree murder, whereas now he's having a life sentence. Apparently, when he came, when he was medicated, he was very sad that he had killed the little girl, but also very upset that Gabrielle Giffords had lived. Again, you don't get any more bat poop crazy than that. And that was my case number 6 here in Arizona. Now, number 7, some of you might think, why is this on the list? That wasn't a big crime. So it was 2015, October 9th, and I hear on the radio that there is a school shooting at NAU campus and one person is dead. And I'm like, no way, NAU. NAU, that's where I went to school and got my master's degree. I cannot believe it. It's the most peace-loving school that you would ever encounter, and yet they have a school shooting. Well, that was a little bit off. It wasn't exactly a school shooting. What it was is kind of a fraternity party gone bad. And this is a sad case. Everyone's lives that was connected to this evening has been destroyed. So there's a frat party or some kind of a big party on an apartment complex right across the street from a Mountain View Hall on NAU campus. And during this party, there's a bunch of frat guys. There's this guy named Stephen Jones who was a pledge for a frat, and he gets in some kind of a fight with 4 guys from a differing fraternity. And one of them punches Jones in the face. He gets like a bloody nose, and he's all worked up, and he leaves. You know, everybody here is drunk too. So if he had just gone home, that would have been the end of the story. But apparently he had gone into his car, which was in the Mountain View Hall parking lot. And so now they've moved to the NAU campus. This is how it became the NAU school shooting. Stephen Jones shoots the 4 guys, shoots every one of them. And this young man, Colin Bra, is killed. And it's very sad. He is killed, and the other 3 guys are injured. Some of them are injured bad. So he has killed 1 guy and wounded 3 others. Now, eventually that evening, they do apprehend him. And he is saying it was self-defense because he was in fear for his life. Which, if that had happened at the party and he pulled out the fire and killed them on the scene, it would have been self-defense. But because he went back to his car and retrieved the firearm and then shot the 4 guys, it's no longer self-defense. But that was his lawyer's position. The first trial, we had a mistrial in 2015, like a mistrial. They brought it to trial again in 2019, where Stephen Jones pled guilty to manslaughter and aggravated assault. And I could see this young man actually was very remorseful. I saw him in front of the judge crying, sobbing, so sorry that this had happened, that he had done this, and he would gladly change positions with Colin Brown, and he would be dead and send Colin Brown back to his family. I actually think he was sincere at that time because he had sobered up. It was the same thing in the interrogation room. You see, he's crying. And the moral to this story is, if you are going out drinking, do not bring your firearm. Okay, you're more likely to get into one of these brawls because you are, not in your right mindset than you are of getting into a place and accurately defending yourself. So if you're going out drinking, leave your firearm at home. This is a very, very sad story where everybody is ruined. Now, Stephen Jones is only spending 6 years in jail, which some people thought was not fair, but yet he is going to be haunted by this for the rest of his life. And his mother of Colin Brown up on the stage crying, sobbing, her life is ruined, and I believe it. Imagine if that was your kid that had been killed. Awful. The 3 boys that got shot, I'm sure all of them were going to have PTSD. Very, very sad, sad situation. And that's why it comes in at number 7 in my list. These are the 7 crimes that actually happened in the state of Arizona that shook my world the most. Okay, so my name is Dawn Dickinson. I live in beautiful Sedona, Arizona. I do sell real estate anywhere from Black Canyon City North, mostly in Sedona Verde Valley, but then all of the cabin towns near Flagstaff too. But this real estate channel, this video channel, this YouTube channel, living in Arizona. This is my hobby. So if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. And if you think this is interesting, might want to see more of them, write a comment below. I mean, there were many cases to talk about happening in Arizona. We have Mikhail Biggs, who disappeared waiting for the ice cream truck. We have Robert Fisher, who murdered his entire family, set the house on fire, and hasn't been seen since. I think this is 10, 11 years ago. We have the Snaggletooth killer, who actually was in death row for about 20 years before they exonerated him with a DNA. We have the Baseline serial killer. We have the Phoenix serial shooter. We have the armor car robbery that occurred on the Ahwatukee 24 Theater, where the armor car guard was murdered and robbed, and they have not found that guy since. So again, there are many crimes that have happened. Once the state gets this big, you start seeing more crime. Not to dismiss the severity of any of those, but these 7 I'm talking to you about today kind of were the ones that impacted me the most, based on how old I was when they happened and where I was in my life. So that's it. I post videos on this channel every single week, so I hope you subscribe, and I hope to see you back here again next week.